The evolution of technology. Technology evolved hand in hand with the evolution of modern man as he tamed nature and mimicked it. First, he built toys, and the toys eventually turned into weapons for hunting and defending, and then for fighting and conquering. Then they evolved into tools, which were used to make more toys. Complex technology based on silicon evolved in the same pace as complex life based on carbon. Just like man evolved from cellular life, computer technology evolved from the stone. If the appearance of cellular life 2.5 billion years ago marked the beginning of an imaginary day, and that the present now marked the midnight of the day, then each second corresponds to 30,000 years. The dinosaurs appeared at 9:45 in the evening. Modern man, with his Stone Age technology, appeared 1 second before midnight. The Bronze Age and the abacus were introduced a tenth of a second before midnight. The steam engine started 100th of a second ago, and the first electronic computer started churning out bits of data 1 millisecond ago. If the appearance of modern man 25,000 years ago marked the beginning of an imaginary day, and the present now marked the midnight of that day, then each second corresponds to 100 days. The Bronze Age and the abacus appeared at 7:50 in the evening. The steam engine started 10 minutes before midnight, and the first computer turned on just 3 minutes ago. Each few seconds, a new generation of technology is born into the world. When I started university in 1970, one of the things I had to bring with me was a slide rule. It was always with us and never ran out of power. By sliding the middle part of the ruler and the cursor to the right positions, we could do all the calculations that are now made using a pocket calculator. The university had a computer center with a computer that cost millions of dollars. It took up an entire floor of a building and required a team of people to run it. The room had to be air conditioned to keep all the equipment from heating up. When we were given an assignment, for example, to write a program to convert weight values from pounds to kilograms, then we had to type every line of that program in a machine that punched holes in paper cards, a card for every line. We submitted our pack of punched cards to the computer center and anxiously hoped it would come back without errors the following day. Otherwise, we had to resubmit it and wait till the next day for the new results. When there were no more mistakes, the computer rewarded us by printing out on a roll of folded paper our work that we then handed in to be marked. By 1975, computer kits were available for the first time that could be built by soldering components on a circuit board. Someone at the gas pipeline company I worked for came up with an ingenious idea. Instead of driving 500 kilometers to a remote station to close a valve along the gas pipeline, sensors measuring the temperatures and pressures and gas flows could be used by these primitive board computers to control the valves automatically. Most thought him a little foolhardy and opposed his idea, but he was able to convince the company to give his project a try. My job was to write and test the programs and punch them out on rolls of paper tapes. Then I had to drive to these remote stations and install these computers. Every letter and document that I wrote took a few days. First, to write it so that the secretary could type it and send it out by express post, which took 2 or 3 days to deliver. By 1985, the very first computers for consumers that were not in a build-yourself kit form became available. One was called Sinclair 1000 and cost under $100. It was the size of a book with a miniature keyboard, and it was ready to use from the box. An ordinary TV was used as a monitor, and a cassette player was used for the memory. I bought one and copied all the data from a nutrition table and wrote a program that calculated the amount of nutrients in a meal. Then I wrote a program to print out the data in a bar graph form. What took me days to do before with a calculator, I was able to do in a matter of a few hours. But writing the programs to do that took me a few months of working all night long. By 1990, I had my own computer in my office for writing text and for doing drawings. My computer had a spreadsheet program called Excel. What took me a few hours to do with my Sinclair 1000 at home, the office computer did much better and nicer in a few minutes. Instead of cassettes for memory, my new office computer used floppy disks, and a few years later, mini disks, which could store a lot more data and transfer it a lot faster. Within 30 years, computers run 1,000 times faster, can communicate with 100,000 times greater bandwidth, and could store 1,000,000 times more information. Communication equipment in 1980 could transmit 50 megabits per second, 50 kilometers. In 2010, they could transmit 50 terabits per second, 5,000 kilometers. An increase of 1,000,000 times more data transmitted 100 times longer distance. Processing speed increased from 1 megahertz in 1980 to 1 gigahertz in 2010. Internet bandwidth increased from 1 kilobits per second in 1980 to 100 megabits per second in 2010. Hard disk capacity was 1 megabytes in 1980, and it is 1 terabytes in 2010. This exponential trend, characterized as Moore's law, cannot go on forever. It is limited by the size of the atom, because atoms cannot be divided without destroying them. At today's pace, that should be reached in 10 to 20 years. So get ready for increases of 1,000, going from kilo to mega to giga to tera to peta to exa to zeta and all the way to iota before we hit that wall. A trillion is a very big number. You can visualize it with piles of money. $1,000,000 in $100 bills fit into a shopping bag. $1,000,000,000 fit in a truck. And $1 trillion needs a huge warehouse. Technology runs parallel to nature, usually mimicking it. Most of the time, technology is much superior to nature, but not always. Man has yet to successfully mimic the properties of wood, the spider's web, or the human brain. The best mousetrap always was and always will be a house cat. Meow.